Today we will talk about the history of income tax raids. If you are someone who is into investing in stock market or even cryptocurrencies, then you must have heard about income tax raids. Well, if you haven't, then let me tell you that income tax raids are carried out by the government to investigate whether an individual or a business is evading taxes or not. If they find that a person is indeed evading taxes, then they may proceed with prosecution against such person. In India, the income tax raids are conducted by the Income Tax Department, which comes under the Central Board of Direct Taxes, which itself comes under the Ministry of Finance. Now you might be wondering, why do we need this raid in the first place? Like, why can't the government just check all the bank statements and transaction records and then take action? Well, here is the thing. The government does do that. And in fact, there is a software called as the SAG. And it is through this software that the government keeps a track of all the bank transactions and other sources of income to see if the person has paid his taxes or not. But sometimes the government does not find the results conclusive enough, and so they send a notice asking for some clarification. For example, if a person has deposited a large sum of money into his bank account, then the government will want an explanation from the person about the source of that money. So the person explains that this amount was given to him by his father as a gift, and now the government would ask for a proof of that gift. So if the person has made the declaration about the gift in his wealth tax return, then the government will go ahead and cross-check the same with his father's income tax return. But what if the person has not made any such declaration? In that case, the government would come to a conclusion that this person has concealed his income and hence he has evaded taxes. And therefore, based on that, they would carry out further investigation. Now this process may take a lot of time because the government has to gather enough evidence to prove that the person has evaded taxes. And so, in order to expedite this process, the government carries out income tax raids. During such raids, they search the premises of the person and they look for things like cash, gold biscuits, jewelry, and documents like passbooks, property papers, and so on. They also scan the computers and mobile phones and other electronic devices to look for financial transaction records. The officers usually carry a warrant along with them, which gives them the authority to conduct the search. However, there have been instances where the officers have been accused of planting evidence during these raids. Once the raid is over, the officers would seize whatever they think is relevant, and then they would ask the person to submit a written statement explaining each and every seized item. Then, after the investigation is done, if the government finds that the person has indeed evaded taxes, then they would issue a notice to the person and they would give him a chance to explain himself. After hearing his explanation, if they still find him guilty, then they would proceed with prosecution against him. In most cases, the person who is being raided would obviously try to hide his assets. He may try to throw the cash out of the window or delete the financial records from his computer. And so the government has laid down certain rules regarding what should be done in such cases. According to Section 132 of the Income Tax Act, the officers who are carrying out the raid have to maintain a proper record of the search. They have to record the number of rooms searched, the places where the search took place, and the things that were seized, along with the reasons for seizing such things. Apart from that, the officers have to mention the identity of the person from whom the things were taken, along with his signature and thumb impression. Not only that, but the person whose premises were raided also has the right to inspect these records and even make copies of the same if he wants to. Moreover, according to Section 133 of the Income Tax Act, the seized things have to be properly labeled and kept in a safe custody. Also, the person from whom the things were seized has to be given a proper receipt mentioning the list of seized items and their whereabouts. In addition to that, the government has also laid down certain rules regarding the valuation of seized items. For example, in case of jewelry, The government has prescribed certain factors that have to be considered while valuing them. These factors include the weight, purity, market rate, making charges, and labor charges, etc. And once the valuation is done, the government either returns the seized item back to the person or they deposit the value of that item in the bank account of the person from whom it was seized. Apart from all this, there are certain restrictions imposed on the officers who are carrying out the raids. According to Section 132A of the Income Tax Act, these officers cannot take any legal action against the person whose premises they are searching. Also, they cannot demand entry into any safe or locker unless they have a valid search warrant for the same. Not only that, but they also cannot search the premises after sunset or before sunrise unless the person himself has given them permission to do so. Also, they cannot use any force to open any safe or locker or to seize any document or any other thing. And if they do end up damaging any property during the search, then they have to pay compensation for the same. Well, as far as the procedure is concerned, it is pretty robust and well defined. But the question over here is how often is it actually followed? You see, conducting a raid is a very sensitive task because the officers involved could be accused of planting false evidence or framing the person on false charges. And so it is a very critical job. However, in many cases, people have accused the government officers of misusing their power and authority during such raids. For example, in one case, the officers allegedly planted 40 lakh rupees in the house of a person, and then they carried out a raid and seized the same. Now, obviously, this is a very serious allegation, and it has resulted in a lot of controversy. In fact, there was a case in Karnataka where the High Court directed the government to pay 1 crore rupees as compensation to a person whose house was raided and his ornaments, and cash worth 1 crore rupees was seized. The government had to pay this compensation because the officers failed to follow the due procedure, and also because they did not return the seized item back to the person despite repeated requests. Now imagine you are a government officer who is carrying out a raid, and you are getting a lot of resistance from the person whose house is being raided. In such cases, the officers have the authority to use reasonable force to gain entry into the locked rooms, or the safe or the locker. But what exactly constitutes reasonable force? Is it okay to break open the locker using a gas cutter as in this video? Well, no, this is absolutely not justified. Even though the person did not give the consent for the search, the officers did not have the permission to cut open the locker. As per law, they should have sought the assistance of a locksmith to open the locker or safe, especially when they knew that there was a gas cylinder inside. This negligence resulted in the death of 2 persons and a huge loss of government property. And so the government has to pay compensation to the family members of the deceased employees. So as you can see, even though the procedure is quite robust, it is only as good as the people who are supposed to follow it. If they misuse their power and authority, then it would not be surprising to see people accusing the government of political vendetta. For example, in 2013, there was a famous case where the government carried out raids at the house of the Chief Minister of Gujarat and also at the house of his close associates. And so, obviously, this gave rise to a lot of controversy with the opposition parties accusing the government of misusing its power and authority. Not only that, but income tax raids are also very stressful and traumatic for the person on whose premises the raid is being carried out. The officers usually arrive unannounced, and they do not even give the person a chance to get his lawyer or his accountant along. And so the person has to answer all the questions without any professional help. In addition to that, the entire search and seizure process is also quite humiliating. The officers go through every single document and every single book and every single thing in the house. And so it is quite traumatic for the person and his family members. And so if the government wants to improve the effectiveness of income tax raids, then they should focus on improving the accountability of the officers carrying out the raids. There should be a proper system in place to deal with the complaints against these officers. And the government should also consider the option of deploying independent auditors to carry out these raids instead of the government officers. That way, there will be less chances of political vendetta, and also there will be less complaints of harassment. And so that's all for today. I hope you found this video interesting and informative. And if you did, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more such videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with my next video. Bye bye.